AITA for pulling out of my sister's wedding due to her toxic in-laws? For some background, my sister Stella and I are identical twins, both 29 years old, and will both be 30 by the time her wedding takes place this fall. When I got married 8 years ago, I had Stella as my maid of honor, and she promised that I could be hers when her wedding day arrived. I have 2 daughters, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, who will be the flower girls at Stella's wedding. My marriage ended a little over 2 years ago, triggered by stillbirth and my husband's infidelity. It was an incredibly difficult time, and if it weren't for my parents and sister, I don't know how I would have survived the overwhelming stress, loneliness, and sense of abandonment I felt. I was in a really bad place. With the help of therapy, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression. I quit drinking, and a huge part of my recovery is thanks to my amazing sister. She's the reason I kept pursuing child support from my ex when he abruptly stopped paying. It was such a stark change, from being the world's best dad to a complete deadbeat, that even his own mother was disgusted with him. Stella got engaged to John, who's 35, last year. His parents are covering about 60% of the wedding expenses, while our parents are contributing 30%, and Stella and John are covering the rest themselves. The biggest stipulation is that the wedding must take place in John's family's church, with a full mass and communion. Everyone is on board with this because it's going to be a very big wedding. Tonight, Stella invited me to dinner, as they had finally secured the date for the church and reception. I assumed this was the moment she would officially ask me to be her maid of honor. I was excited, especially since I haven't been to a wedding party since my own wedding. John joined us for dinner, which was strange because Stella hadn't mentioned he'd be coming in our texts leading up to the dinner. We welcomed each other as usual, but John didn't hug me, which was even weirder. After we ordered our drinks, they got down to business. In short, John explained the following. Despite my best efforts to keep it under wraps, my parents found out that you're divorced when they asked why your husband wouldn't be attending the wedding. They're now uncomfortable with you being the maid of honor because they believe it won't reflect well on the church if my family hears about your divorce. You can still be a bridesmaid, but you're not allowed to mention your divorce or any of your conditions during the wedding events. I was stunned, and I felt tears in my eyes. Stella started crying too, and she tried to spin it in a good way. This is way less stressful for you, so it's a good thing. Emile has already approved my BFF as my MOH, so please don't make this any harder. I knew that I couldn't possibly stay there through an entire meal. I had to process this new info alone. I didn't speak. I just paid for my wickedly expensive cocktail and left to order an Uber home. A few hours ago, I texted Stella that I would not be at her wedding party at all. That was my decision. I wouldn't pull my daughters out, but I would only attend as a guest. She wouldn't take this as an answer, so I had to temp block her due to her excessive texts and calls. I sent my parents a summary of what happened and promised to call them when I was in better shape tomorrow. Stella thinks that this is a total overreaction. I don't even want to know what John thinks at this point. I have a call scheduled with my parents this afternoon. From what I gathered, they are extremely upset with Stella and John at the moment. Depending on how that goes, I will talk to my girls about doing something big and fun instead. The more I think about it, sitting through a mass sounds less and less appealing. I'm not even religious. In comments, I keep seeing that everyone thinks that I should pull out my daughters. I disagree. As I currently stand, I would be fine attending as a mere guest to keep my daughters on track. It would actually make it easier to not have to bring a friend with me just as a part-time babysitter for the occasion. I will not let anyone in John's family talk down to my children. If I have any sort of inkling that such a thing would happen, only then would I pull them out as flower girls. This is simply too important to my daughters for me to pull them all together. They would be crushed if they were told they couldn't go to the wedding anymore. Update. John found the post as he lurks on Reddit and shared it with Stella. I wish I used the fake name Ursula, since she joked about that detail herself. Ursula has officially called off the wedding. When John was ranting about the post and how bad the comments were painting him, he said that, "Your sister must be off her goddamn meds and going maniac. You better get her under control." But then Ursula actually came undone on him and began calling out everything that John and his family had put her through. Then she took off the ring and chucked it across the living room. John went into a rage, and while he didn't do anything but yell at her, he threatened her in regards to her mobility issues. Ursula uses a cane to walk. This was what triggered her to text our parents and myself. By the time our parents made it to the house, John was gone, and she had packed up her bags and left with them. Her cane was not in the house. Ursula wanted to thank you all for the comments calling her out. It shattered the mosaic that John built around them, and while we're both still raw and processing the last couple days, I'm glad to have my sister again. She was someone else I hardly recognized a few days ago. As kids, I was more outgoing and she was more reserved. So I felt obliged to go along with her the other night despite how conflicted I felt. But again, Stella Ursula says thanks for the wake-up call. And John, if you see this, F you. Edit. You know what? F you, Keith.